here. Okay, so
At least you can hit record.
yeah. So what we're gonna go through is Dear Prudence, which
Okay.
is a process you can go through to be able to foresee and to be able to rule what's coming up in front of you in life. And basically, it's a plan for operational success and like bulletproof planning for you to conduct yourself. It's a way to avoid non-essential risks by seeing problems in advance. And it's a way to prepare for everything and anything that could go wrong. Okay, so it's a specific process for that. And we can use it before just about anything. It's all about careful reflection and planning, which really is the price of greatness. If people are willing to pay that price. And so we would apply this before any upcoming initiative, whether that's a meeting, a project, an important conversation, a presentation, an event, an adventure, a business initiative, anything like that, we could apply this process for. Now, do you want to just throw me an example of something that might be applicable for this?
I guess like a career change.
Okay, perfect. So we could say, changing career. Okay.
Yeah.
We're looking at changing career. So the first question we'd ask is what's at stake? What's at stake with this decision? Because the more that's at stake, the more thorough and detailed we'll have to be in planning precautions and like early detections of things that could go wrong. So what's at stake? So number one would be, what's the financial risk of changing career? So what might that look like if we're asking that question?
Do you want like a ranking? Like,
Well, I would just say, how might that play out in this example? Like, how would that be applicable? You might say something like, well, there's a financial risk that I won't make as much money as I used to, like,
right.
If I change careers, right?
Gotcha.
There's a financial risk that, I may leave the job I'm in now and maybe I won't find a paying job for a bit. So I may be, going through a time when I'm going to need a financial buffer, right? Maybe it's not so much like monkey bars, like you just go from one to the other. Maybe there is a little bit of an interval in between. So we could go into just addressing any financial risk related to this issue, right?
Yeah. I would say, yeah, financial risk for sure. Like in the sense of like, let's say, even, I don't know, even not being as fulfilled, like in the sense of like, let's say, for example, with the pandemic, the fitness industry being impacted,
Yeah.
right? So there's been a lot of judgment calls where it's like, okay, this is the third time around now. Can you still withstand that? You know what I mean? So I think, for a lot of people, that's been like a burning question too. It's like, I love the industry. There's a lot of opportunity that I can still kind of hone in on, but how much can I financially sustain?
Perfect. You nailed it, because what you're doing now is you're talking about the financial risk of staying, right?
Right.
Which I didn't mention yet, but you nailed it. Go team. Look at you. Did it. Yeah. There's a financial risk in staying that this
Right.
career is subject to some things that are outside our control.
Yeah.
Right? There could be a fourth wave. There could be another pandemic with another mutation in a year or two, right? Like there's a financial risk to staying in it as it is, right? And this is where, like, later on when we think what preventative action we can take, we can
Yeah.
pivot to be more virtual and
Right.
in order to not be as vulnerable to this type of stuff. So that's where this process will help us just map things out. Now, there's 16 questions to what's at stake. Okay, 16. We don't necessarily answer all of them, but we entertain all of them because all of them may be relevant. So what is the legal risk of this situation? Okay, so if we're in this situation, what is the legal risk? And what do you think might be an example of legal risk here?
I'm not sure. Like legal.
Yeah, well, it might be something like this. It might be something like, if you leave an employer, you got to be careful that you're not taking like intellectual property and using it inappropriately, because that could put you at legal risk. You got to make sure that if you leave a job and maybe there was a lot of bad things that were happening, that you don't say too much and get yourself into a position where people are taking legal action against you. You know, you might
Gotcha.
just need to bite your lip on some things, or you might need to, so there might be some conflicts of interest that could put you at legal risk. So there could be a few different things to consider. Maybe that's not a very common one, but it's something to at
Yeah.
least have on the radar, right?
Right. Yeah.
And then,
I don't have too much of that.
yeah, I don't think anyone really would, for the most part,
Yeah,
but it's important to know. Number 3
for
would be,
sure.
what is the reputation risk?
That's a good one. Well, for myself or in general, I would say
Anybody
like,
in general, yeah.
yeah, in general, I think a lot of people associate themselves with their profession. Like, I'm a doctor. I'm not my own being. I am a doctor. I am a physiotherapist or a trainer or whatever it is. So I think that speaks largely to your like knowing yourself. So that might be a big chunk of yourself that you're like, if I let go of this, then who am I?
Yeah, so your reputation with yourself, your identity, and then
Identity.
also like the way that you exit. If you're exiting a job or a career, you want to make sure that you do things with good form, because otherwise it could affect your reputation, right? And people talk, and people are connected to other people. And so even if you're trying to step into a different industry, if somebody knows somebody who knew the way that you exited, then, and I'll give you an example.
Right.
There was an employee that was once going to be hired where I work, and this employee had left their previous job doing a lot of intentional bad behavior on the way out. Like
Yeah.
intentionally bad on the way out to try to sabotage the company, but was really good at putting on a nice act. And so they were about to hire them, and I said, hey, look, I have some information about this applicant from their previous employer. They didn't think that we would find out clearly, but we found out, and turned out the information was correct, and he ended up not getting hired, right? Because he transitioned in with such poor taste because of intentional bad behavior. And he didn't seem like the kind of person, because he could speak very well, he could dress very well, but there was a whole side to his character that we didn't know about, right? And that would make him not very good for the trusted position he'd be in. So
Yikes.
yeah, but that happens. So number 4 would be, what is the operational risk? Now, this might be a bit of a confusing question. You might be like, well, what does that mean, operational risk? And it might mean like this in terms of your operations. Like right now, maybe you have evenings and weekends off. Maybe that'll change if you change career. You might get into the restaurant industry, and it's evenings and weekends are your busy times, right? Like maybe you enjoy sleeping in, and your next job will require you to get up at 4 a.m. or something like that. So, what would be the risk, the operational risk to consider?
Yeah, I would say even like lifestyle change, or maybe you're in a good groove with like in this industry, in fitness, there's lots of like split hours and there's a lot of flexibility, but I know with a lot of other industries there isn't as much flexibility. Like a 9 to 5 is not often what you'll see in fitness. It's usually like a 6 to 12 and then like a 4 to 9.
Yeah.
So there's like flexibility, but yeah, I think that's the biggest that would be a really big operational change, going from like steady hours to less flexible. And
yeah, or how about you don't get to wear your pajamas all day like you do as a trainer? Like
well, yeah. And you could just 5 minutes before just turn on your camera, you're good.
It's not as easy to fit in your workouts, because on break, it's not like you're already at the gym,
So true.
And you can have trainers as your workout buddies, which is great too, so there's an operational risk involved here, right?
Right.
Now, number 5 for what's at stake would be, what is the management risk? The management risk could be, maybe you got a good manager now, but as good as a new job is, you might get an absolute iron fist tyrant as a manager, right? Or if you are a manager yourself, you might get a bunch of really challenging people underneath you if you transition into another position, right? Any other thoughts on management risk and how that might apply to this?
Yeah, so even in terms of like changing job roles and whatnot, like working under somebody, that could be like again like a job risk. Like potentially you are working under yourself and you're getting to like you're not really getting second opinions in that sense. Like you don't have to like consider, I guess, a corporate structure or anything like that. You're just like representing yourself. So going into that could be challenging for sure.
Yeah. And number 6 is, what is the intentional bad behavior risk? Intentional bad behavior risk. And I'll give you an example of one that I experienced was, there was a trainer that switched from one gym to another. And the person that oversees him was so bitter that they started a rumor that the other gym like recruited him, but that was untrue. And he spread this rumor up the chains of command and tried to take action and put this employee in really hot water with his new employers because of kind of the threat of the relationship between the two organizations and everything else. So you have this manager that's so busy, they made up a fake rumor to try to get this person in trouble with their new employer.
Wow.
Yeah.
People go lengths.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
And I know it was, I know it was made up because it was about me and something that I said and did, and which was completely fabricated. And I'm like, yeah, this is totally made up. This is completely a fake rumor that's just going to try to like create a lot of drama and hardship out of bitterness, right? So, so yeah, there that can happen. And
yeah,
the point the employee made was, now you can see why I left that position and that company. Right?
100%.
Look at this rumor they made it up, and they're trying to make you look bad and this and that. And they're like, now you know why I left, right? And it's like, yeah, of course.
100%. Oh man.
But the risks are real.
They are real.
So
yeah.
And intentional bad behavior risk as a matter of prudence can be that, in some cases, you might have employees that may commit fraud and other things. Like there's, if somebody's had that kind of a habit before, like for example, if somebody lies on a resume, because I was for the better part of 14 years doing the job interviews where I worked previously, if somebody lies on their resume, then I don't hire them, period. Because the risk of intentional bad behavior and intentional lying in the job is quite high. Right?
Yeah.
Like they've demonstrated, very, very carelessly that they will conduct themselves with fraudulent ways.
Okay.
Right? So that can be something you just keep on the mind. If I was applying this to hiring process, that'd be something I'd keep in mind. Okay, there's a high risk this person will do intentional bad behavior.
Okay.
Okay, question 7. What is the competition risk? What is the competition risk?
Well, even with regards to like the pandemic, I think I've already seen a lot of individuals kind of change career paths. So in that sense, like I guess it's high competition at this point because a lot of people are like changing career paths. But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of.
Yeah, so you can say, okay, it's competitive right now because a lot of people are transitioning right now. The other thing is that if you're looking at changing into a new type of industry, what is the competition like? Are you going to start working for a company that's going to get crushed by their competition? right? So we have to
Right.
keep in mind it's not just a matter of who you're working for, but what does their future look like? Does it look like, there might be a time when somebody thought it's a really good idea to take a top executive position at Blockbuster. They could be like, look, I'm going to work at Blockbuster. I've been working for this my whole life. There's something called Netflix that's come out, but I don't think it's going to affect us. People like going
Right.
to the movies. Be like, there's a little bit of a competition risk there. You might be getting a job at the very last Blockbuster. Like.
Honestly, I forgot about Blockbuster. So crazy.
Yeah.
But even like with regards to changing new careers and let's say like needing a credential, for example, like let's say you want to get certified in something, there might be like a time lag. So maybe your competition will be even like higher because you're kind of starting at the bottom again.
Yeah.
So that's also something to
you
consider.
have to go right back down to the bottom level. Yeah, for sure.
Or whatever bottom, you know what I mean by bottom.
Yeah, and work your way up. Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. Now, next question, number 8. What is the cyber risk? The cyber risk. Now, the cyber risk is probably going to be more relevant to any type of position you get. So it could be like, okay, if I'm all on my computer, then there's a risk I could get hacked. There's a risk that I could lose. A Wi-Fi tower could go down. There's a risk of, how can I make sure I'm not totally dependent on the computer stuff? How can I take some reasonable precautions against viruses on the computer, like whatever? So how does that relate to my circumstances? And that might be, the cyber risk might be relevant to, if I stay as a virtual personal trainer, then there's a cyber risk, right?
Right.
Maybe I'm an unlikely target. They're going to target big companies instead, probably, rather than just, me sitting here in my basement. But, it could be something to consider for even another job. If you're getting a job that's just basically computer based, then you may want to know what the cyber risk is, especially if you're overseeing a large department that involves use of the internet. Then you want to make sure your department doesn't get hacked and ruined. There's a really big bunny in my backyard right now.
Hey, we're moving on to bunnies. Once we got visited by a skunk, and now bunnies.
Yeah, I don't know if you can
Bunny
see
season.
him. Can you see him?
Yeah, I can. Aw. Hello.
Anyway, this is my life. You found me.
Unexpected visitors.
Yeah, it happened.
Love it.
I'm like, he's just looking at me. Hey, buddy. All right. People would probably think that's my pet.
I know.
He's super cute. Anyway, now
cyber risk.
Yeah, and then there's a number of questions we could ask as well. We could ask, what is the disruptive events risk? What is the relational risk? Who's depending on us, and how are we at risk of letting them down? I might say, well, my current clients, maybe I transition them to somebody. What is the opportunity risk? Well, maybe I was working my way up and I'm going to miss out on the opportunities that I may have available in my near future if I just stay where I am.
Right.
What else is at stake in this situation? What are the worst possible outcomes? Worst possible outcomes, you know what? I end up flat on my butt with no job, but then I can always just get another job eventually, right? Like, how high is the probability of risk, right? So worst possible outcomes, how likely is that to happen? Well, who knows, right? What are the best possible outcomes? How high is the probability of best possible outcomes? So let me ask you that. Like, let's say, imagine I'm a trainer, it's a pandemic, and I'm thinking about leaving to join a different type of job. What is the worst possible outcomes and how probable is it?
You hate the job. How probable is it?
Yeah.
It's like a 50-50 chance. No, depending on the position.
Yeah, you could hate your job. I mean, a lot of people hate their job. Personal trainers love their job. That's a very rare, for the most part, it's a very rare position to be in society.
To not like it, you mean, as a personal trainer, to not like your job?
Yeah, well, there's a few trainers that don't like their job, but
definitely
in general, people love that job, and that's a rare thing.
Gotcha.
People love their job.
I hear you. Another worst possible outcome. Maybe you get fired and you don't have a job at all afterward. Like probation period.
Yeah.
You don't make it past that.
Yes.
Um,
And that'd be something to have on the radar. Like, look, don't count your chickens before they hatch. Like,
right.
and this is a very real thing because, I know of one story of a situation where somebody was like, well, I don't think I have to worry about the probation period. I'm showing up early. I'm doing my work. I'm doing everything perfectly according to plan. They didn't make it past the probation period because somebody had a family friend that they wanted to get in. And
Oh,
so it was political. And so they're
right.
just like, yeah, we're not moving forward with the experiment. And they're just like, wait a minute, I was a flawless employee, and everyone else is shocked. But the next thing that happens is it's a family friend who ends up getting into the next position and then making it past probation. And it was sort of it was a political call, right? So,
Mhm.
but that is one of the things we need to be aware of, is that we're still at risk of politics.
Right.
Okay. What are the best possible outcomes and how probable is it?
Well, I think there's always going to be like an opportunity there. So like sometimes like even now in my head, I'm kind of like, no matter what you take on, you can always make it a great experience, just like based on based on how you go into it, your attitude maintained throughout. But like in terms of like the best possible outcome,
Yeah.
like just learning something new about yourself. Maybe this is like an undiscovered field that you love, or maybe you get connected to a resource who connects you to another like position or a new friend. um but also like yeah, I would say so one opportunity to learn more about yourself. So the best possible outcome is that you find a new strength. um Another like good outcome now I think too is like any new role, like I think in any industry now is always there will always kind of have that work from home option.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. So that's a good point.
So that's great because there's flexibility in that. And I don't think that a lot of industries had that before.
Mm,
So being flexible with that is, I think, great because then you do have a buffer if like this were to happen again and whatnot, or even just, maybe you function better this way. You have that option.
yeah. Yeah. So those are some best possible outcomes. And another best possible outcome is I might leave this and find the career of my dreams.
Right.
And maybe I love this career, but I might find the career of my dreams and where I'm meant to be in life. That's best possible. Or best
Mm.
possible might be that I decide not to go, not to change. I decide to stay where I am. And after this pandemic, it is smooth sailing for the rest of my career in this industry. Right. So I,
Right.
I could go best possible for staying, best possible for going. How probable is it? How probable is it that after this pandemic, we won't have to worry about pandemics anymore? I don't know. I mean, at this point, maybe not as probable. Maybe it seems likely that we might have something, maybe even in the next 10 years or so. But is it that big of a deal? Is that bad? So how probable is it I can find the career of my dreams? Well, I would say it's probably pretty probable because I could just keep switching until I get there. Right? I could
Okay.
just keep trying out new things until I get there. And if I can't find something, maybe I can create something.
Right.
So
I like that.
basically, to summarize what's at stake, we want to consider the risk to benefit ratio. Is it still worth the risk? And of considering a career change, right? So we might say, well, it could be the best decision of my life. The risk isn't really that big of a deal because even if I leave what I have now, I could probably just get another training job anytime in future. It's not like it's a really high level entry thing and I've already got skills and experience, right? I may lose my seniority where I'm at, but that's not really that meaningful to me. So, maybe it's okay to step sideways and test out the waters with something else. And I can always come back here if it doesn't work out. It could just be an experiment, right?
Right.
So that might be an example of concluding it. And how might you conclude this in terms of what's the risk to benefit ratio? Is it still worth the risk? What might be an example of a summary conclusion?
The risks aren't actually that high.
Okay.
Um because there's always, like you said, there's always fitness to fall back on. There's always going to be like the opportunity to fall back on, because you don't necessarily lose, you're not losing your credentials right now in that sense. You're not like, it's not like I'm dropping the license, or I'm dropping that. It just might be put on pause, or maybe I revisit it again. It's not like a closed chapter. It's just maybe a new one.
Yeah. Okay, great. Now that we're going to continue forward in that direction, we're going to go through 3 different categories. What could go wrong with the situation? We're going to go into what could go wrong with others, what could go wrong with me, and how might we take preventative action? Okay. So the first thing is, what could go wrong with the situation? So I want you to imagine everything failed and reverse engineer it. How did it fail? Why did it fail? So what might you say? Just give me an example of how this might play out.
So how it fails.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the job isn't what I thought. Isn't what I thought it was. It's a lot less hands-on than I thought, and it's all paperwork, all desk work, like that is it. And then I hate it and want to drop it. Let's say.
Perfect. So that's how it failed. And the reason why it failed, maybe you didn't give it enough of a test run before jumping in with both feet, right? You didn't test the waters enough. Or maybe you weren't as clear on what you like and what you need in a job. And so when you saw the description of the job, it seemed okay. But that's like looking at a recipe and it looks good. And until you prepare it, you realize it tastes like junk, right? You're like, man, I should have made that recipe. The ingredients looked good. But once I
Right.
tested it out, it sucked.
That's too relatable.
Yeah. So we could say, one of the risks is that you just end up in something because you weren't diligent enough on making sure that it's in alignment with your highest values and your aspirations at the moment. And that might happen because maybe you took the job because the starting salary looked appealing. And then you realize it wasn't worth the happiness you were sacrificing. Right? So then you could be like, well, now I need to make sure that I don't get blinded by, a very appealing starting salary, when really it's going to be something that's going to make me hate my life, like
100%.
Right. Now some other questions to consider might be like, what could break down? What could change in technology? How might policy change? How might competition change? Like, one of the things that's happened with people I know is like, sometimes they started a job and the job's got all these different great policies, but then they all of a sudden turn into this nickel and diming phase, and they're taking away some of their benefits and programs, and some of their perks start getting taken away once somebody new just started. I mean, for other people who've been at the company a long time, like it's not as much of a bait and switch, but there could be a bait and switch that happens where all these things get taken away that were kind of promised when you started employment, right?
Right.
And, like, I know people who have been verbally promised certain things once they take a job, but then later when they said, hey, what about this? The person who hired them said, oh, we just said that was kind of like an idea. It wasn't a promise. Like, because nothing was written down, people can retract an offer that was used to bring somebody into an employment situation.
Okay.
And so that can be something that if it's not written down, then once you realize you're working with somebody that doesn't have integrity, that's a move they pull that I know has been pulled on people before.
Yikes. Okay.
And then they realize, like, this is a bad place to work. Now it all makes sense, right? So we would also consider, how could consistency be a factor? And consistency might be a factor like, okay, if you're going in somewhere to work, you got to make sure you can show up on time and you've got a reliable source of transportation? You know, how might timing be wrong? Is this the right time? Like we said, like for depending on what job you might be switching into, it might be a very super competitive time to get in. What are the distractions and how can we avoid them? So that's a good one. Why don't we unpack that one? Because right now I'm just going through, there's like 21 questions for what could go wrong with the situation.
Yeah.
And I'm just rhyming some off and then we can chat about certain ones. So number 8, I think, is a good one. What are the distractions and how could we avoid them? What are your thoughts?
Distractions with like this new job first, like for example, is that what you're
Yeah,
asking?
like everything related to this
Yeah.
decision and this initiative.
Well, I would say definitely like even transportation and so forth and like hours. So time and transportation are like two distractions. So it might be a little bit further. You might have to drive a little bit more. So you're not actively working as much because you are commuting.
Mm-hmm.
That would be a distraction.
Yes, that could be a distraction related to the job. There might even be distractions that prevent you from screening the job as well as you could, right? And
Right.
researching into the new job as much as you could. What might those distractions look like?
Like you said, like dollar signs could be a distraction.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I know for some, like maybe they're, attracted to like the salary. So you're like, oh, but the salary's good. So like everything else doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
So you start to kind of like shut off your, I guess, your wisdom or your insights and knowing of what you truly need in a job. Um, Also, like another distraction, I guess, could be like maybe the individuals you're working with too. So like you might know some people who work there that you like want to work with, but you're not actively looking at the job title. Does that
Mm-hmm.
make sense? So
Yeah,
maybe it's attractive in the sense of the people, or maybe the fact that the organization is highly ranked, but you're not actively looking at your position there.
yep, absolutely. So those are things to keep in mind for sure. For sure. And another thing might be like, maybe somebody is watching Amazon Prime, they're watching The Stand and they're really getting into that Netflix series and it's distracting them from doing their due diligence and researching good job opportunities and stuff. And they've got friends and family that are distracting them from giving the full attention needed for this project and initiative, right? So there can be managing some of that stuff because it's an important moment in life. It's one of those sliding door moments, right? In which anything can happen, So you want to make sure that you yourself can give full attention and focus to this process, right?
Right.
Now, number 9 is a really good one. Do we have the necessary skill level in all the areas that need it? And this is going to depend because, when we take a look at the different options out there, we'll be like, okay, what are the skills? If I'm going to map out, and you can even ask people, you can say, okay, for this position, what skills do I need to master? Please let me know because I want to do some stuff in advance. I'll take online courses and everything else just so I don't have to, at a consideration to other people, I can speed up my own learning curve. Right. And just having the foresight to even ask somebody that and
Yeah.
take initiative that you're going to work on your skills in advance, whether or not you get the job, you're going to start today on building up that skill set. And in the end, you're going to win because you've got those skills.
Right.
So I can think of one gig I was going to get. There was a potential gig I was going to get, and it was in the same. It was going to be something I was going to do, but it required a whole other bunch of skill sets. And I
Gotcha.
took the initiative and read every book I could and developed all of these skill sets related to like brainstorming and everything. And things never went through with this opportunity, but and they knew that I was developing the skills, but things never went through. But I was like, it doesn't matter. I got all these amazing skills now, and I'm going to apply
Right.
to everything else I do. And I'm not thinking of it just as like just to get the position that we may be pursuing, but was also just going to benefit us in life and transferring those skills to other areas. So that can be key. Get those skills on the radar. What skills do I need to learn? What skills
Gotcha.
can I benefit from? What books do you want me to read? What online courses? And then do it anyway because you'll still just gain, right?
Right. There's always that plus, that net plus then.
The number 10 might be, do we have the necessary experience level in all the areas that need it? And, you know, it might be a matter of not yet for a certain job. So this is where volunteer stuff can help out in terms of just getting, you know, if you have to get some skills in an area, you just got to volunteer, you know, like working with different populations. They might say, well, we want to know that you can work with different populations. So you can, you know, volunteer with, and I remember I was asked this at one point. I was considering medical school, and I was told that, you know, you got to be able to show that you're good with different types of personalities. That's going to be necessary experience because you're going to get all kinds of that. So I spent a summer volunteering at a group home for the autistic. Now, I didn't move forward with going into medical school and stuff for a whole bunch of other reasons, but I did enrich my life by working with the autistic people. And I had some great memories working with them. And there was one was an autistic savant, and his name was Wayne. And it was really funny. I remember that Wayne had they told me that Wayne's like autistic special ability was that he remembered people's names forever, right? And and so I had been there for about a month, and you know, I'd spend time with Wayne, but it's very rare that I would use like my name or anything like that. Like I was introduced to him in the beginning, but anyway, one of the staff was like, "Look, you know, you've been here a month." They're like, "Wayne will totally remember your name from when you were introduced on day one." So like, "Wayne, do you remember this guy?" And Wayne's like, "Yeah, yeah." And they're like, "What's his name?" And he's like, "Brendan." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, that's good. I've been here a month. He remembers my name," because I'm not really using my name with him. So it would have been from day one. Now, you know, then they ask him, and then they're like, "Oh, no, wait, watch." They're like, "No, Wayne, what's his full name? His first and his last name." And then he kind of looks at me confused. And I'm like, when I was introduced to him, I don't think they said Brendan Fox. I think they just said, "This is Brendan." So I don't think he ever got my last name. So I am ready to be super impressed if somehow he MacGyvered this thing and figured out my last name. But he's kind of like staring at me like this. And I'm looking at, I'm like, "Are you going to get this? Because this is going to be crazy." And then, you know, the staff is like, "Okay, I could see he's struggling a little bit." So the staff gives him a little bit of tip. They're like, "We'll give you a reminder. We'll give you a reminder. It's an animal. Do you remember what his name is now?" And he's like, yeah. And then he looks at me and like dead straight in the face. And he's like, "Brendan Hippopotamus." Like that. And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "That's so convincing. I was pretty sure my name is Hippopotamus and I just didn't know it." I'm like, "No way." Right?
Perfect.
And then they're like, no, it starts with an F. And he's like, "Brendan Fish." Like this.
The first one was definitely better. Hippopotamus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So I think my friends and family called me Brendan Hippopotamus for a while.
That is so funny.
Anyway, I got a cool nickname from that experience. Now,
wow.
Number 11 would be, do we have a reasonable standard of research before moving forward? If not, what else should we look into? What are the top people in this area doing? What are the commonalities of their approaches? How might we apply what's worked for others? So I might say, okay, thinking of switching careers, what are the things I need to research, right? What do I like in a job? I need to get clear on that. What's my flexibility? What do I want for flexibility? What do I want for compensation? What do I want for work environment? You know, what do I want for creative freedom? I want to get clear on all these things, all the wants. Then I want to get clear on all my competencies. What's everything I'm good at? You know, am I good at English? Am I good at public speaking? Am I good at researching? Am I good at communication? Am I good at photography? Am I good at and just list them all. What am I good at? What do I want in a job? And then once I map that out, I can say, okay, if it's something that's low on what I want in a job and low at what I'm good at, that's a dumb option. Dumb. Why? You know, like if it's something that I'm really good at, you know, like maybe all these things that are in line with what I'm good at, but it's low on what I like, maybe the pay is low, the environment is crap and all this and that, then that's a seductive offer. That's a seductive offer. I might be tempted because of, you know, because I know that I'll just kick butt in this position, but it's not going to fulfill me. It's not meeting all the demands of what I want and what I would like, you know, like now I might have an option where it's really high on everything I want in a job, but low in everything I'm good at. Okay. Really
Right.
high in everything I want, really low at everything I'm good at. That would be considered a difficult option. A difficult option. However, with training and experience, a difficult option can transition into an ideal position. It's very rare you're going to find an ideal position where it's like you have all the skills right now and it's everything you wanted in a job. Usually that happens later in life once we've built up more of a skill set. Right now, you're probably going to be looking for a difficult position where you may not have all the skills needed, but it's everything you
Right.
want in a job. It's going to be stable. It's going to be paying well. It might be a positive atmosphere, an exciting mission that you can be a part of, like all these different things. But you're going to need to develop some skills. You're going to need to develop some critical thinking skills. You're going to need to develop maybe some persuasive writing skills, maybe develop some different public speaking skills. Like there might be a bunch of different skills you got to develop, but when you do, then you're living the dream job.
Okay.
So that might be an example of, how to go about researching for something like this and how to make sure that you don't end up in a dumb position or a seductive position.
Okay.
Right? Because you can't transition a seductive position into anything really worthwhile, but you can transition a difficult one.
Okay.
And so that would be something to think about in terms of research. That's a very important one. Number 11, I think, is a great one. Now, number 12 is this the right thing to do? Like, is it the right thing to transition? Does that make sense or no? Like, maybe that's not really how I should be responding to the situation. That might be something to consider. Are we doing things in the right order? Is there something better to focus on right now? Maybe I focus on just getting the skills and treading water with what I'm doing and then applying because I'll have a better chance of making it through, right? I know that for my wife, she was applying for jobs in the environmental field for a long time and nothing was going through, even though she did 2 degrees in the environmental field. She did 2 degrees. And I said to her, I don't think we're doing things in the right order. I said, I think you actually need to do a 3rd degree.
She must have loved that.
They said, why don't you go back and do your master's? Okay. Because right now you just have like a general common degree. If you do your master's, you're going to stand out. And I said, do your master's. Don't worry about money. Like I'll take care of the money piece, whatever. We'll figure it out. Just go ahead and do your master's. Right. So she did. And then as she was in her master's, she got a great job, like job of her dreams. And they didn't care that the master's wasn't completed. They just knew she was doing her master's. So it actually ended up happening faster than we thought because we were prepared that she would end up focusing on doing her master's. And one of her jobs was she got to release 7 baby deer. Like that was, she showed up at a site. She was there. The rehab specialists were there and because she takes care of environmental areas. So she got to like pet the baby deer. She said they were really bony. Like it wasn't really that cool. But like think about what a dream opportunity that is. But it had to do with doing things in the right order. Applying and just blitzing the applications isn't the right thing right now. Leveling up was the right thing.
Got it.
Right. So then we might think, what are other obstacles that might derail or hinder efforts? How will we detect when a redirection is necessary? Do we have a necessary feedback loop? So we might be like, okay, well, here's what they promised me. If I don't get my raises in different conditions at the 3 or 6 months as they promised, then I need to consider, that this is not going to be a reliable employer or whatever. Or you might think, after 3 months, if I don't like it, like I'll give it 3 months, but if things don't sort themselves out, then maybe I need to start considering a way out, and then my way out might be, so that's a feedback loop. We want to have a feedback loop to know that it's working out. And that's like a tripwire. We're setting up a specific thing. And then if that happens, I'm going to take this specific action. I'm going to immediately start researching and planning my next steps or whatever it might be, right? So, how could the plan be more detailed and strategic? Where might we run into legal problems? What rules should we follow? How can we act to achieve the highest good? Whose perspective should we consider? Think big picture of how things could develop further down the road. What else could go wrong? So a bunch of different things like that. I'm a big fan of how can we act to achieve the highest good? I believe that, if you have a current employer, you should do everything within your power to love them and honor them and do what's best for them if it's not in your heart to stay. And it shouldn't matter we shouldn't be thinking of ourselves in terms of, yeah, but that's going to just hold me back and there might be some inconveniences. You want to think of just like human family, like just think of everybody as a part of your extended self. Do what's best for the people in your current situation, even if there's no potential upside to you. Just do the right thing, I think, is always something that will make us just be more at peace with who we are and how we're living. Now, the next question is, what could go wrong with others? Okay. Now, I'm going to just go through this one quickly because we don't really know who the others are in this situation, right?
Yeah.
But, you know, if there was others involved in your situation, you might be like, who do they have to be and where do they have to be a 10 out of 10? You know, so that's important to know. You could know that if you're going to apply to a new job, maybe it's a really good culture right now, but that could change, right? You may have a really awesome new boss, but that could change. Maybe his wife like cheats on him and divorces him and he develops an alcohol problem or something, and he just becomes out of control. Like, we don't know. Like, that could happen, right? People can change, right? So, you know, how might others feel threatened and try to sabotage us? You go into a new job, you're likely going to find that if you're doing a good job, there'll be people that are jealous of you that might call you fake because they want to lower your social value because they're threatened. That's something to be aware of as well. You know, how might others misinterpret us? How might we confuse people? You know, how might other people feel uncomfortable, unsafe? You know, some different things. Where could lack of clarity be a factor? So we may have to be assertive if we don't understand anything on the new job in terms of roles and duties and expectations and compensations. We might have to just be very clear and upfront. That's where a lot of things go wrong. Okay, let me get this clear. You're saying this, this, and this. Okay, another point I need to clarify. Can you just tell me what happens if this happens? Okay, great. This and this, we need to do that. We need to take full responsibility on being assertive in order to get maximum clarity. You know, we need to consider the management we're working with. What kind of a personality type do they have? You know, are they the kind of person that likes to be in control? So if so, we've got to use a lot of like, we've always got to give them choices rather than giving them a linear solution, because that's how they work better. They like to maintain that locus of control. So we've got to be able to jive with that. How can timing be a factor? Conflict of interest. You know, are we working for somebody that potentially can harm our previous employer competitively? Like, that might be a conflict of interest. Maybe we want to avoid being in that situation. There's so many other jobs out there. Like, why do we have to, you know, necessarily pick something that's, you know, how can we make sure we think before we act? What do we need to remember, or what do other people need to remember? You know, so a number of different things here to consider in terms of what could go wrong with others. And then what could go wrong with me, right? How can I make sure I think before I act? How can I make sure I comprehend what is necessary and I get clarity and I don't jump to assumptions or conclusions? Somebody might tell you it's a really awesome job, but they get $1,000 referral bonus, you know? So you might get in there and be like, this wasn't so awesome. I sacrificed a lot to be here. And I didn't realize that the person referring me was getting this $1,000 referral bonus. And now I'm here. Like, I made a wrongful assumption, right? You know, how can I make sure that my motivation is right? So that's where it comes down to, okay, is my motivation right? Like, am I motivated by like love and the mission at work here? Or am I motivated by the money and security, right? Because if you're motivated more by the love and connection of the initiative, you might be inspired to give it your all, right? If you're just motivated by the security of the situation, then maybe you won't be. Maybe it'll just be a job and not a passion. So, and we won't be unlocking the superpower of our maximum motivation, you know? And then we might think, where do I need to be a 10 out of 10? What habits, tendencies, or attitudes might get in my way? You know, maybe sometimes I procrastinate. How can I make sure that I apply the free will I have to the mental effort required to finally get to the bottom of my procrastination habits and resolve them once and for all, right? Whether it's self-doubt, fear of failure, what's making me hold back. So what are the major things to stay focused on? But how might I get distracted with minor things? You know, major things to get focused on might be just maintaining good self-control and inner peace at all times. That's always going to make me better at relating to other people. I'm always going to be better at creative thinking and problem solving when I hang on to my inner peace. And if I'm not focused on how do I do that, and I'm focused on all these other nuances of the technical aspects of the job, then I might not be able to, that might be something that goes wrong with me, right? How can I keep an accurate perspective? How can I stay consistent? What might I forget, and how can I make sure I remember? If some of your things might be, a lot of things are going online right now. Sometimes people forget to hit record before presentations. Sometimes people forget to hit record before different meetings and stuff like that. We need to maybe have like a post-it note or something, because as simple and obvious as that sounds, life happens. People forget stuff, right?
Yes.
So, we might think, where do I need more skill? Where do I need more experience? A big question I like to throw out there is, what are all the spiritual challenges and lessons in this situation? Right? And we might think, okay, it's a career challenge, but let me ask you, what are all the spiritual challenges and lessons in this situation? What do you think?
I would say like maybe a spiritual challenge would be like in terms of time. So maybe potentially this job requires more hours. So it kind of takes you away from maybe your spiritual practices, or maybe you tapping into those grounding habits that you have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you're serious about making the spiritual effort, how serious are you? It's
Yeah.
easy now, but
Right.
it's always going to be easy.
Right.
That's a spiritual challenge and lesson. Another spiritual challenge and lesson is, what are you going to choose to value? What are you going to choose to value? What kind of a mission do you want to be a part of? Do you want to be a part of a mission where it might feed your ego and feed your bank account, but really you're adding a lot of disharmony in the world because you're working for a company that's, doing some bad things or not really contributing in a meaningful way? Do you want to value working for a company that you feel really is making the world a better place in a meaningful way to you? You might choose to value what making the world a better place involves. Does that involve helping people with the body? Does that involve helping people with the mind? Does that involve helping the environment? Does that involve helping the oppressed? Right? So these are all the different things to consider.
Hmm.
I know somebody who, they worked in the music industry as an executive, and then they transitioned to working for a charity where they went around the world and they were helping musicians connect with oppressed, disadvantaged communities all around the world. And what they said is, I went from working for people who thought they were God to working for God.
Oh, I love that.
And that's what they were doing. They were working just to feed
Wow.
somebody's ego, but that was a spiritual lesson, right?
Yeah. And you see that person saw the contrast,
Yes. Yeah,
which
because at the
helps.
end of the day, what seemed really exciting and stuff was really just a mission to puff up somebody's pride or whatever, right? And then they're like, well, that's really the mission I'm on. It's just the puffing up pride and ego. Like, is that really what I'm here to do? Do I have to go through that lesson right now? Maybe I do, to experience it from the inside out, right? So what is the spiritual lesson that's trying to happen right now?
Hmm.
You know?
I like that.
And I think that's where I usually ground people into, where you're making a decision. Just try to zoom out. Like, all this fleeting worldly stuff, like it's like ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Like, all these buildings and everything are going to be dust one day, but let's focus on eternal gain in a realm that transcends this realm, that applies more to the ultimate reality. And because ultimately, what you're going to take from all of this is who you become. And you bring who you become into whatever state of existence you transition into after this. Just as you showed up and there was natural qualities about you when you showed up in this dimension, there's going to be stuff that you're taking with you when you go into whatever dimension comes next. So rather than getting hung up on all of the short-term, short-sighted things, I encourage people to just zoom out.
Yeah.
And then we might think, who or what might I fail to be grateful towards? And what else could go wrong with me? So I just leave it kind of like open-ended. What else could go wrong with me? So those are kind of some of the questions there. And then we might ask what could go wrong with, or how can we take preventative action? You know, like, and we could say this, we could say, what practical steps can we take for extra precaution? What can we set up for early detection of a problem? So I might say, hey, I'm going to keep somebody accountable to check in with me and give me these questions on my job after I've been there for 3 months, if I start a job, just so I can early detect if I'm in the right place. If I'm like, no, this place is toxic, the job's horrible, I didn't realize that this company is dumping all their pollution into the ocean. Like, I didn't know that when I started working here, and they're lying, and lying is encouraged, and it's a blame and shame environment, blah, blah, blah. Somebody might be like, but I got to pay my bills. Somebody will be like, no, you already committed. You're not going to stand for this. You got to get out now, right? You're playing for the wrong team, right? So accountability might be a good thing for considering a redirection. Having a backup plan. Your backup plan might be like, maybe I just go back into previous career, or maybe there's some other things to consider. Also, what should we do if things go unpredictably good? Things go unpredictably good and the job's like better than ever, maybe we decide to move closer, and so we cut down on commute time and different things like that, or invest in the company, right? And what negative attitudes and perspectives might show up, and how can we identify them, call them out, and rally against them in advance? I would say, you know, sometimes like touchiness and sensitivity and ego and taking things the wrong way, that's a big thing that shows up in work. And I would just say, hey, look, before we have a meeting, let's all agree that we're going to give each other benefit of the doubt. Like, nobody just take offense and interpret things in the worst way possible. Give everybody generosity of interpretation before today's meeting. Let's all decide on that. Does that make sense? Yes, of course. Because so much time is wasted and so much unnecessary suffering and disharmony because people are getting touchy and sensitive and defensive about hearing things that weren't actually said, right?
Yes.
So, you know, what are the spiritual lessons that are trying to happen here? Have I clearly identified them all? How can I fully embrace and engage with each of those lessons? Right? So that might be something that we really want to unpack. How might we create systems to keep things in check? You know, Tim Hortons is a great company because of their systems more so than the people. All they do is the people are just technicians that just get plug and play into that system. That system is just an awesome machine. And they just pump out successful businesses everywhere because just about anybody can be a technician for them. They're able to expand rapidly and be hugely successful. So we want to think about, in our domain of competence, how can we create plug and play systems where we can just do things and just rock it, you know, because then we can just expand and grow in so many ways.
Okay.
So that's it. And that's like, what practical steps might we take for extra precaution? So what would you say for practical steps? What might we need to consider?
I think, well, number one, just kind of outlining like outlining strengths and also like what I need in a job would help make that decision clear of where it is on that 4 squares, whether it's seductive, whether it's a difficult decision. That for sure. I think that would be a great practical starting point. But I also think that check in with somebody like, hey, this is what's important to me in this job 3 months in. Is it meeting that? I think that's fantastic. Because that is your test run. Like you do have to be in it sometimes to see it. But I think that would be a great check in, like, hey, is this aligned? And if not, where do I have to go next? So at least there's a system there. I like that.
Absolutely. And I think that would be, you know, if I was in that situation today, that'd be what I'd do. I'd make the quadrants. I'd get clear on everything I bring to the table and everything I'm looking for. I'd have that crystal clear.
Okay.
Because one wrong decision can lead to many years going in the wrong direction in life. You can end up in a seductive job position for many years before you learn that lesson on humility, right? Really, humility is all about the attitude that there's more to learn. Egotism is all about the attitude that there's more to prove. So if we bring an egotism attitude, I got to prove to the world by making good money and getting a good executive job, then that's going to be your spiritual lesson, and you will be humbled and get a lesson eventually, right?
Right.
So I would encourage you, you know, be gentle with yourself. Even the best laid plans are naturally incomplete. We learn from doing. Everything is an experiment. Just set it up as such. You know, at the end of the day, Yogananda once said that basically everything that happens to you in life is for one of two reasons. Every single thing that happens to you in life. Do you want to take a guess at what the reasons might be?
A lesson.
Oh, you got it. Education. Yes. Education is number one. Now, number two, I was shocked and I wouldn't have got it. So it's either happening for your education or your
Um,
no pressure.
hold on.
I know
No, no.
I didn't foresee this one.
Um, like spiritual direction?
Well, that might fall under
Maybe.
the education category. Everything
Okay.
is happening for your education or your entertainment.
Oh, I would not guess that.
I wouldn't have guessed that, but I love that answer.
Double
Some
E.
things in life are strictly for our entertainment and nothing else.
That's lighthearted.
Isn't that right, Mr. Bunny? Yeah,
Still there?
yes. Well,
Wow.
there's also Mr. Squirrel and Mr. Crown Sparrow out there right now. But you know, it's all for your education and your entertainment. So enjoy it all. Make sure that you're grasping the learning lessons. The learning lesson of today was prudence, which is the virtue of careful reflection before acting. It is the opposite of impulsiveness. When we make big decisions in life with an impulsive energy, we suffer the consequences, and so does everybody we care about, because we're not at our best. But when we are at our best, it's best for everyone who's involved in our life. One of the most loving things you can do is be at your best, because everybody else benefits. And prudence is one of those superpowers you can use to be able to foresee everything in advance so that you can almost be like a master chess player.
I like that.
So key takeaways from today?
Well, definitely working with the quadrants first. So I think that would be like a really big takeaway. But I like the last part that you just mentioned, education or entertainment. I think, naturally going into these decisions, yes, they're really big. They're big decisions, but at the same time, like still being gentle and lighthearted with yourself and understanding that like there is a bigger picture.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are the two.
Absolutely. All right. You did an awesome 10 out of 10 job today.
Thanks,
So
Brendan. You too.
anybody who has stuck with us to the end of this conversation on prudence, this is a gift of love and wisdom from on behalf of us to you, not really from us, but through us, because any success we had in teaching any of you today is a reflection of the success of countless beings before us that have helped us be who we are today so we could be here and share. And it is an honor and pleasure to just help those who are looking for help in any areas like this. I think though we could all benefit from the virtue of prudence. And so other than that, rooting for everybody in the game of life. Let's do a go team on 3, fist bump, and we're out. You ready?
We're ready.
All right. No false starts. No, I tried to trick you. No false starts.
See, I didn't even flinch.
You were super good. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Go team!
Go team!
Brendan, hippopotamus, out!